As the elevator climbed, pressing her toward the 40th floor, Victoria Hayes pressed her trembling hands against the cool glass. The endless skyline of Manhattan stretched out before her, a sea of steel and ambition that was both a thrill and a terror. She'd worked 3 jobs to get through college, graduated top of her class from a small university no one had ever heard of, and now she was here. Stone Enterprises, one of the most powerful real estate investment firms in the country. Her reflection stared back. A navy blazer from a discount store, a crisp white shirt she'd ironed twice that morning, and dark hair pulled into a tight professional bun. She looked the part, she thought, even if her heart was hammering with doubt. The doors opened with a soft chime, revealing a world of quiet, understated luxury. Marble floors gleamed. Abstract paintings, worth more than her entire student loan debt, decorated the walls. Everything here whispered of success, of a world she'd only ever seen from the outside. A woman in her 50s approached with a warm, disarming smile that instantly eased some of Victoria's tension. Her name tag read Margaret Sullivan, Director of Human Resources. "You must be Victoria," Margaret said, extending a hand. "Welcome to Stone Enterprises. Delighted to have you join our summer internship program." Victoria shook her hand firmly, just as her father had taught her. "A good handshake shows confidence," he'd said, "even when you feel none." "Thank you so much for this opportunity," Victoria replied, her voice steady. "I promise to work harder than anyone here." Margaret's eyes crinkled with approval. "I believe you will. Come, let me show you around before the orientation meeting." As they walked through corridors lined with photos of luxury properties and stunning architectural achievements, Margaret explained the company's structure. Stone Enterprises didn't just build buildings. They rebuilt entire neighborhoods, transforming neglected urban spaces into thriving communities. "Our founder, Julian Stone, started with a single apartment complex in Brooklyn 20 years ago," Margaret explained as they passed a wall of glittering awards. "Now we operate in 15 cities across the country. Quite particular about maintaining our mission while growing the business." Victoria had researched Julian Stone extensively. At 38, he was famous not just for his wealth, but for his principles. He refused to compromise on quality, treated his employees exceptionally well, and had a strict personal rule: no dating employees. No exceptions. Ever. It kept his private life completely separate from his professional one. The company cafeteria took up the entire 35th floor, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering breathtaking views of the city. Margaret had left Victoria to grab lunch before the afternoon orientation. The space was surprisingly casual, with comfortable seating and a menu that ranged from gourmet sandwiches to international dishes. Victoria chose a simple salad, still conscious of her limited budget even though the meal was complimentary. She found a quiet table by the window and pulled out her worn notebook, reviewing her notes on the company's current projects. She was so absorbed in her reading that she didn't notice someone approaching until a deep voice broke her concentration. "That report is 3 months old." The Hartford project shifted significantly since then. Victoria looked up, and her breath caught in her throat. The man standing beside her table was tall, with dark hair touched with silver at the temples and eyes the color of storm clouds. He wore a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, but it was his presence that commanded attention. Authority radiated from him like heat from the sun. Julian Stone, in person, standing right next to her. Victoria scrambled to her feet, nearly knocking over her water glass in the process. "Mr. Stone, I'm so sorry I didn't realize. Please, sit," he said, and his tone was an invitation, not a command. "I didn't mean to startle you. Make it a point to meet all our new interns personally, but I don't usually find them studying during lunch on their first day." He gestured to the empty chair across from her. "May I?" Victoria just nodded, unable to find her voice. This was not how she had imagined meeting the CEO. She had pictured a formal introduction in a conference room, surrounded by other interns, a place where she could blend in and observe. Julian settled into the chair with an easy grace, looking as comfortable here as he surely did in a boardroom. Up close, Victoria noticed the fine lines around his eyes, the way his gaze seemed to assess and understand in a single glance. "You're Victoria Hayes," he said. It wasn't a question. It's from Riverside State University, double major in economics and urban planning. "You wrote your thesis on sustainable community development in low-income neighborhoods." Heat rose in Victoria's cheeks. You read my application? I read all of them, Julian replied. But yours stood out. Your perspective on integrating affordable housing into luxury developments without creating economic segregation was fascinating. That's exactly the kind of thinking we need here. For a moment, Victoria forgot to be nervous. This was her passion, the very reason she'd chosen this field. Too many developers treat affordable units as an obligation rather than an opportunity, she said. Leaning forward, her earlier anxiety gone. But when you design mixed-income communities thoughtfully, everyone benefits. Property values stabilize, local businesses thrive, and you create real neighborhoods instead of just buildings. Julian's expression shifted. Something warm flickered in those gray eyes. Go on. They talked for 20 minutes that felt like 5. Julian asked probing questions about her research, challenging her assumptions in ways that made her think deeper. He shared insights from his own experiences that weren't in any business journal. Victoria found herself forgetting who he was, engaging with him not as the intimidating CEO, but as someone who genuinely cared about the same things she did. The orientation meeting starts in 10 minutes, Julian said finally, glancing at an elegant, understated watch. He stood, and Victoria rose with him, a sudden wave of disappointment washing over her. She didn't want this conversation to end. Thank you for taking the time to talk with me, Mr. Stone, she said. I've learned more in 20 minutes than I expected to learn in a week. Julian extended his hand. When Victoria shook it, she felt a jolt of electricity that had nothing to do with professional networking. His hand was warm and strong, and he held hers just a moment longer than necessary. Call me Julian when we're in casual settings, he said quietly. And Victoria? I have a feeling you're going to do remarkable things here, as he walked away. Victoria sank back into her chair, her heart racing for entirely different reasons than when she had arrived that morning. She had come to Stone Enterprises to build her career, to learn from the best, and to prove herself in a world that rarely noticed people like her. She had not come expecting to feel this, and from the look in Julian Stone's eyes just before he left, she suspected he hadn't expected it either. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss the next part. 3 weeks passed in a blur of spreadsheets, site visits, and late nights at the office. I threw myself into every assignment with fierce determination, arriving early and staying late. I wanted to prove that my first-day conversation with Julian had been about substance, not luck. But Julian Stone had become an unexpected constant in my daily life. He'd appear at my desk with questions about my analysis of the Brooklyn renovation project. He'd invite me to client meetings where seasoned analysts twice my age presented their findings. He challenged my ideas in ways that made me sharper, better, more confident. And every single interaction felt charged with something neither of us dared to acknowledge. The conference room on the 42nd floor had become my second home. It was nearly 9 in the evening, and I sat surrounded by architectural plans, financial projections, and cold coffee. The Chicago development proposal was due in 3 days, and the numbers just weren't working. I rubbed my tired eyes and stretched, looking out at the city lights twinkling below. The office had emptied hours ago. Even the cleaning crew had made their rounds. I was alone with my frustration and a problem I couldn't solve. You're still here. I spun around to find Julian standing in the doorway, his tie loosened and his jacket slung over his shoulder. He looked tired too, human in a way that made my heart skip a beat. The Chicago numbers don't balance, I said, gesturing helplessly at my laptop. We undeliver the community center and the green spaces without cutting into profit margins that make the whole project unsustainable. But without those elements, we're just building another luxury complex that prices out the neighborhood. Julian set down his jacket and moved to stand beside me, studying the screen. He stood close enough that I could smell his cologne, something subtle that reminded me of cedar and rain. Show me what you've tried, he said. For the next hour, we worked side by side, rebuilding the financial model from the ground up. Julian didn't just tell me what to do. He asked questions that guided my thinking, pushed me to see angles I had missed, and listened when I pushed back with ideas of my own. What if we phased the development differently? I suggested, my fatigue forgotten in the sudden excitement of problem-solving. Start with the affordable units and community spaces first. Build goodwill with the neighborhood, then develop the luxury components. Banks might offer better terms if they see community investment up front. Julian straightened, looking at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. That's brilliant. It's also completely contrary to standard development practice. Standard practice isn't working, I said boldly. Not if we want to build communities instead of just properties. A slow smile spread across Julian's face, transforming his usually serious features. You sound like me 20 years ago, before I learned to be cautious. Maybe you shouldn't have learned that, I said softly. The air between us shifted, becoming thick with unspoken words. Julian's smile faded, replaced by something more intense, more dangerous. Victoria, he began, then stopped, seeming to struggle with what to say next. Before he could continue, the lights flickered once, twice, then died completely. Emergency lighting kicked in, casting the room in a dim, almost intimate glow. Blackout, Julian said, moving to the window. Below us, entire blocks of Manhattan had gone dark. This looked like it hit the whole grid. I joined him at the window, and we stood together in the semi-darkness, watching the city adapt. Car headlights crawled through the streets like slow-moving rivers of light. Buildings flickered with flashlights and phone screens. It's beautiful, I whispered. We never see the stars in the city, but look. Above the darkened skyline, stars were actually visible, pinpricks of light that were usually drowned out by the urban glow. My father was a construction worker, Julian said suddenly, his voice quiet in the darkness. He worked on luxury high-rises his whole life, and never made enough to live in any of them. When I started this company, I swore I would build differently. Buildings that created opportunities, not just profit. I turned to look at him, surprised by this glimpse into the man behind the reputation. Is that why you have so many rules? To protect what you've built? Julian met my gaze, and even in the dim light, I could see the conflict in his expression. I have rules because mixing personal feelings with professional responsibilities destroys both. I've seen it happen too many times. Good people making bad decisions because they let their hearts override their judgment. That sounds lonely, I said gently. It is, Julian admitted. But it's also safe, clean, uncomplicated. And what if complicated is worth it? Julian turned to face me fully, and my breath caught at the raw emotion in his eyes. You know I have a policy? No dating employees, no exceptions. I know, I whispered. You also know that policy exists for good reasons. Power dynamics, professional complications, the risk of favoritism, or accusations of favoritism, I understand. So you understand why this can't happen. But even as he said it, Julian's hand reached up to gently touch my cheek, his thumb tracing the curve of my jaw. Why? I can't let myself feel what I'm feeling. My heart hammered against my ribs. I should step back, agree with him, reinforce the professional boundary that protected us both. Instead, I leaned into his touch. What are you feeling? I asked. Julian's other hand came up to frame my face, his touch achingly gentle. That you're the most remarkable person I've met in years. That when you talk about your ideas, your passion makes me remember why I started this company. That every time you walk into a room, everything else becomes less important. Julian, I breathed his name like a prayer. That I'm breaking my most important rule just by standing here with you like this, he continued, his voice rough with emotion. And that I don't care anymore. When Julian kissed me, it was nothing like I had imagined. I had pictured passion, intensity, the kind of kiss that swept everything away. Instead, it was tender and questioning, as if he was asking permission with every soft press of his lips against mine. I answered by wrapping my arms around his neck, rising on my toes to close the distance between us. The kiss deepened, and I felt the careful control Julian maintained begin to slip. His arms pulled me closer, and I could feel his heart racing as fast as my own. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Julian rested his forehead against mine. This is a terrible idea, he murmured. Probably the worst, I agreed. It could complicate everything. Your internship, my company policies, both our careers. I know. People will talk. They'll question whether you earned your position or if I'm showing favoritism. Let them talk. Julian pulled back enough to look into my eyes. I'm serious, Victoria. I've spent 20 years building this company's reputation. I've board members, investors, employees who depend on me to make sound decisions. Dating an intern violates every professional boundary I've established. Then don't date me as your intern. said my voice steady, despite the fear fluttering in my chest. Date me as Victoria Hayes, the woman who challenges your thinking and shares your passion for building better communities. The person you talk to for hours and forget to notice the time. It's not that simple. Nothing worth having ever is. The lights suddenly flickered back to life, harsh fluorescent brightness flooding the conference room. The city below began to glow again as power returned block by block. Julian stepped back, running his hand through his hair, his expression torn between desire and duty. The power's back. Should go home, get some rest. You can discuss the Chicago project tomorrow. Julian, don't do this, I said, recognizing the retreat for what it was. Don't pretend the last hour didn't happen. He looked at me, and the vulnerability in his eyes nearly broke my heart. I need time to think, Victoria. This isn't just about what I want. It's about doing right by you, by the company, by everyone who trusts me to make good decisions. And what about doing right by yourself? I asked softly. When do you get to want something just because it makes you happy? Julian was quiet for a long moment. Then he crossed the distance between us once more and cupped my face in his hands. Give me a few days to figure this out, to talk to HR, to understand the implications, to find a way forward that doesn't compromise either of us. Can you do that? I nodded, blinking back unexpected tears. I can wait, but Julian, I'm not going to pretend I don't feel this way. Not going to make it easier for you to walk away by disappearing. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. I wouldn't expect anything less from you. He pressed a gentle kiss to my forehead. Go home, Victoria. Shh. I'll see you tomorrow. As I gathered my things and headed for the elevator, I felt the weight of uncertainty pressing on my chest. I had come to Stone Enterprises to build my career, and in just 3 weeks, I had fallen for the one man who could make that dream either come true or fall apart. The elevator doors closed, and I caught my reflection in the polished steel. I looked different than I had on my first day. Less uncertain, more alive, like someone who had finally found something worth taking a risk for. Whatever happened next, I knew one thing for certain. Julian Stone had broken his golden rule, and Victoria Hayes had no intention of letting him rebuild those walls around his heart. Tomorrow would bring answers, complications, and choices neither of us could avoid any longer. But tonight, I carried the memory of his kiss and the promise in his eyes. Sometimes the most important rules are meant to be broken. Thanks for watching. If you want to find out what happens next between Victoria and Julian, be sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next chapter. See you soon. Victoria barely slept, replaying every moment in that darkened conference room. Julian's touch, his confession, the way he looked at her like she was both his greatest hope and his biggest fear. When dawn broke, she had made peace with whatever consequences might come. She arrived at the office early, her stomach churning. As she stepped off the elevator, she half expected everything to be back to normal, but instead she found a handwritten note on her desk. Conference Room B, 8 a.m. We need to talk. Julian. She had 15 minutes to prepare for a conversation that could change everything. Conference Room B was smaller, more intimate. Julian was already there, his back to the door. Duh. Close the door, he said without turning. Victoria did, her heart hammering. Julian, she started. Whatever you've decided, I understand. I would never want to be the reason your company gets compromised. He turned then, and his face held not regret, but determination. I spent all night thinking about what you said, he began, about doing right by myself, about wanting something just because it makes me happy. I've spent 20 years building walls, creating rules. And then you walked in with your worn notebook and your passionate ideas, and suddenly all those walls felt like prison bars. Her stomach dropped when he mentioned HR. I spoke with Margaret this morning, he said. I explained the situation, that I have feelings for you that go beyond professional admiration. What did she say? Victoria whispered. A slight smile touched his lips. She reminded me that I wrote the employee dating policy myself, and that buried in Section 7, there's a clause about voluntary disclosure and departmental transfer to eliminate conflicts of interest. I think part of me always knew that someday I might meet someone worth reconsidering my rules for. Hope bloomed in her chest. What does that mean? Julian took her hands. It means we can do this the right way. You would transfer to a different department, report to a different supervisor. There would be no conflict of interest. You would do that? She asked, tears in her eyes. Restructure your company procedures just for this? I would do more, he said softly. I'd walk away from everything if it meant being with you. But I'm hoping we don't have to choose. Victoria pulled her hands away and walked to the window. You know what people will say? That I slept my way into a better position. They'll question every achievement I earn. I know, Julian said from behind her. I wish I could protect you from that. All I can do is make sure that professionally, everything is above board, that your work speaks for itself. She turned to face him. What if it doesn't work out between us? Then we'll deal with that if it happens, he replied, stepping closer. But Victoria, I haven't felt this alive in years. I can't promise you perfect, but I can promise you real. I came here to prove myself, she said, her voice trembling. Getting involved with you could derail all of that. It could, Julian agreed. Or it could be the beginning of something neither of us expected, but both of us need. Victoria looked into his gray eyes and saw her own fear reflected back. But she also saw hope. I want to try, she said. I didn't come to New York to play it safe. The smile that broke across his face was like sunrise. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. We'll do this right, he promised. Your success will be your own. And when we're not at work? She asked. Julian's expression softened. When we're not at work, I'm just a man who wants to take you to dinner. 3 days later, Victoria sat in her new office on the 38th floor. The transfer had been smooth, professional, but today was different. Today Julian was presenting the Chicago development proposal to the board, and he had asked her to join him. Are you sure? She had asked. People will wonder why a junior team member is in a board meeting. Let them wonder, he'd replied. Your insights are valuable. Now as she walked into the boardroom, she felt the weight of every eye on her. She had to be flawless. Julian presented the overall strategy, then turned to her. Ms. Hayes will walk you through the community integration strategy. Victoria stood, her hands steady. Traditional urban development treats affordable housing as a legal obligation, she began, her voice clear and confident. We're proposing something different. For the next 20 minutes, she presented her analysis, fielding tough questions, never looking at Julian. When she finished, the room was silent. Then Marcus Chen, the most notoriously difficult board member, leaned forward. That's the most innovative development strategy I've heard in 15 years. Who are you again? And why haven't we hired more people like you? Julian caught her eye, and the pride in his expression made her heart soar. The board approved the project unanimously. As they filed out, Marcus Chen paused at the door. You know, people are going to talk, he said bluntly. At them, Julian replied. Marcus smiled. Good. Welcome to the team, Ms. Hayes. I expect great things from you. When they were alone, Victoria let out a long breath. It was terrifying. You were magnificent, Julian said. What? You did that, Victoria. Not me. He leaned closer. Are you free tomorrow night? Depends, she smiled. Are you asking as my CEO or as Julian? Definitely as Julian, he replied. Then yes, she said, I'm free. He kissed her forehead. I'll pick you up at 7. That evening, Victoria called her parents. She told them about her new position, the project, and finally, carefully, she told them about Julian. Her father was quiet for a moment. Is he good to you? Does he respect you? He does, Dad. He really does. Then I'm happy for you, he said. Just remember who you are. You earned everything you have. The next evening, Julian picked her up in a surprisingly modest car, dressed in jeans and a button-down. They drove through Brooklyn as the sun set, stopping in front of a beautifully restored apartment building. This was my first, he said, leading her inside. Everyone said it wouldn't work. They climbed to the roof, where a small garden overlooked the glittering city. But they were wrong, Victoria said. We proved it, he corrected, taking her hand. That first risk changed everything. He turned to face her. I'm taking another first risk now, Victoria. With you, and I think this one might change everything too. I'm scared, she admitted. But I'm also more excited than I've ever been. Me too, he said, pulling her close. As they stood on that rooftop where his journey began, Victoria realized that sometimes the best decisions were the ones that terrified you, that love was worth every risk. Julian Stone had sworn he would never date an employee, but some promises were meant to be broken. They were building a life together, one brave choice at a time. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.